Let's try this again. Welcome to Archival Adventures. I'm Rogan27, Community Collections Archivist here at Virginia Tech, and this is Archival Adventures, a once-a-week show that I do from the archives here, where we explore things that are in the archives. You may be here on either the twitch.tv/VTUL Studios channel, which is the library's channel, or my own personal channel, twitch.tv/Rogan27. And welcome. It is good to see you. I'm just, it feels like it's been forever because we didn't stream last week, which is rare. But there was no episode last week, which may have something to do with the fact that I forgot that switching to the intro scene here doesn't automatically unmute the microphone because it's not set up that way here. Whatever. We got it the second time around. Anyway, it is good to see people. RF Holloway, thank you for the follow. I saw that come in a little bit ago. Let's see, Hannah, it is great to have you here. I think we're off to a slow start today, which, quite possibly because it's been quiet. We didn't stream last week, and whatever. People will show up, or they'll catch the VOD. I don't know. Let's see. So, how about we just dive in? With a nod to the history of Virginia Tech, since that's who owns the materials that we're going to look at. We always make sure that when we're starting this stream, we just remember Virginia Tech has history. And that history is not necessarily great. Virginia Tech acknowledges that we live and work on the Tutello and Monacan people's homeland, and we recognize their continued relationships with their lands and waterways. We further acknowledge that the Morrill Land Grant College Act of 1862 enabled the Commonwealth of Virginia to finance and found Virginia Tech through the forced removal of native nations from their lands in California and other areas in the West. Virginia Tech acknowledges that its Blacksburg campus sits partly on land that was previously the site of the Smithfield and Solitude plantations owned by members of the Preston family. Between the 1770s and the 1860s, the Prestons and other local white families that owned parcels of what became Virginia Tech also owned hundreds of enslaved people. Enslaved Black people generated resources that financed Virginia Tech's predecessor institution to the Preston and Olin Institute, and they also worked on the construction of its building. So, we today are going back to 1862, which is an important date in history with regard to Virginia Tech itself, but this is our sixth time returning to 1862 and the American Civil War for a look at the Phillip Peltz Journal. Peltz was the chief engineer of the USS Dacotah in the Union Navy during the American Civil War, and wow, yeah. Let's try not typing and talking at the same time. That tends to not make sentences work correctly. Anyway, the finding aid is available if you want to take a peek. I'm not going to dive too much into it because, like I said, this is our sixth time. What we are doing today is we're continuing with the summer of 1862. In fact, we will pick up the journal. Oh gosh, I need to math because my brain doesn't do that super easy. I can't do it in my head. We will pick up the journal exactly 162 years and 1 day ago. July 9th, 1862. How's that for timing? So we're going back 162 years. And it is a long, hot July in Virginia in 1862. Long, hot July. That sounds familiar. Almost like that's what we've got this year. Anyway. Our people, are you still enjoying the peeks into this journal? I'm still liking the journal. Last time that we looked at the journal, there was hot air balloons, which we didn't get nearly as much time with as I would have liked. So coming up in the future, I'm going to do an episode entirely on Civil War Air Forces. Hi, Sterling. Looking at the journal makes your life easier. This is true. And hi, Pretty Witchery. You missed the hot air balloons, yes. But, like I said, I'm going to do a whole episode entirely focused on Civil War Air Force, which Civil War Air Force is hot air balloons. So, American Civil War Air Force consists entirely of hot air balloons. So, they will return. Let's see. I don't know where July 9th, 1862 is in the journal. Let me just turn a few pages. Oh, here we go. Page 43. Let's see how we're doing for lighting. Can we brighten a little bit? Come on. It all depends on the reflectivity of the paper, what color the paper is, etc. How the lights will, show up best on camera. And I didn't have it prepped. There. That seems good. Oh, hey, I read those letters before? Oh, yes. You live relatively close to a huge hot air balloon festival. That is pretty cool. The American Civil War hot air balloons were inspired by French hot air balloons. And the history is somewhat interesting, and we actually, I didn't even know that they did any sort of stuff with air forces during the American Civil War. And it was fascinating, and that's why I was like, I need to know more. And so, yeah, we have stuff. We're going to look at both the Union Air Force and the Confederate Air Force. Only one of them only one of them even had an official name. But yeah, that's coming up. I don't know exactly. I don't think that's next week. Next week is like food stuff during World War I and World War II. The week after is Civil War aeronautics. So it's coming. Anyway, how about July 9th, Wednesday? I say that and I look at it and I'm like, my eyes have forgotten how to read the handwriting. It hasn't. It's just I needed it to be closer. Weighed anchor at 10 a.m. to convey to convoy the president up past the dangerous points on the river. I read it as up past, but it looks to me like it just says A past. How about to you? I'm not gonna get too caught up, but that right there looks like a single letter. It does not look like up, but up makes more sense. The previous transcriber also thought this was just the letter A. Anyway, to convoy the president past the dangerous points on the river. Interestingly, though, okay, so this is similar to this, but it looks more like that to me. It might be on past the dangerous points on the river. Because the strokes and how they're made, it looks more similar to the word on than it does to the single letter A. I know. Very, very, like, it doesn't really matter. We understand the sentence, but trying to read and transcribe, it's this is part of it, because sometimes it becomes important with regard to being able to transcribe words that you can't quite parse. So that's like, this is part of the technique. And as I'm looking at this, we have a lowercase a, we have a lowercase a, lowercase a, the question mark, lowercase a, and then we have the word on, we have a lowercase a, standalone, and then we have like a in or on. And again, it's hard to tell. The stroke itself is an up around loop. And that follows the way he's done other lowercase a's at the beginning of words. But it also follows how he did the on. The only difference being it doesn't have the bounce for the N. I'm gonna guess, analyzing the letter and the pen strokes, I do think it's just a lowercase a. I don't think it's anything else. But it's one where a lowercase a, like just the word a, doesn't make as much sense, which is what gave me pause. And because I'm streaming, it seemed like an interesting thing to just point out how analyzing handwriting to understand exactly what's there isn't an exact science. But you can compare it to similar letters to try and figure out, like, from context, the word up would make more sense than a, but based on handwriting, I'd say it's an A. Anyway, and hi, Pretty Witchery. Yes, congratulations on being randomly selected as a VIP for the stream. A little worried that Holy Convince is more likely to give you a VIP on Wednesday when you can't fully focus. Worried that crewman Gary has taken over the bot. Gary always seems to know more than he should. This is true. Gary, oh gosh, Gary might be Section 31? Also, hi, Lord Portico. Okay, I'm going to move past this single letter word that we don't really have to be 100% sure of in order to parse the sentence. Anyway, weighed anchor at 10 a.m. to convoy the president up past the dangerous points on the river. When near Jamestown Island, we ran aground, though the awkwardness of... Wait. No. Yeah, though the awkwardness of the pilot through. Not though. Though didn't make sense, and through does, and I think it is through. It's just split over two lines. Anyway, when near Jamestown Island, we ran aground through the awkwardness of the pilot. We had passed all the points on the river when we were... where we had passed all the points on the river where there were danger. So the chief executive went on his way. Future historians will be so glad half of the younger generations only know how to write and print. Yes and no. Like, script is not that difficult to read, and honestly, no more difficult than reading print. Because everybody's handwriting is unique. And even with print, it can be difficult to make out what the words are. I will say, with print, there is a tendency for the letters to have more shape. This is not bad. Many, many older script documents end up just being like waves. And you can't tell what letter is what. You'll get anything that stands up tall and anything that drops below the line. And anything with a loop in it to give you sort of guideposts to try and figure out what the word is. But anything else, like lowercase n's and m's and w's and i's and o's sometimes, and r's, and all of those little lowercase letters that have bumps in them are literally just bump, 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 and they look exactly the same. Sometimes they're just a straight line across. Have you seen some of those that print? For example, the only way my dad has legible handwriting is if he prints in all caps. Yeah. Recursive is more likely to have combined letters. This is true. Okay, so let's... Awkwardness of the pilot. We had passed all the points on the river where there were danger. So the chief executive went on his way. So President Lincoln left the boat to continue on after the pilot ran the ship aground off the coast of Jamestown Island. Every now and then you get someone who writes like a demon possessed. A demon possessed them, yeah. Probably more likely that they meant to write on but never actually finished the word. It's happened to you on more than one occasion. That, Hannah, that makes total sense too. On makes more sense. And I think, yeah. Plus, like, he generally has really good vocabulary and sentence structure. So this here, where he says, past all the points on the river where there were danger, I know from having read many pages of his writing that he knows that it should be was, not were, but still what his hand wrote is were. So yeah, it happens. So the president disembarked. At 7 in the evening, we got underway, the tide having risen sufficiently to float us off, and ran a few miles down the river, at which place we are now laying. Norfolk, Thursday, July 10th. Hey, exactly 162 years ago today. Precisely 162 years ago today, thermometer, 90 degrees in the shade. Now I have to check, since this is today. And granted, where I am here is a little north of there. So I'm actually gonna adjust, and we will search for the weather in Norfolk. "162 years ago today, the weather in Norfolk, Virginia, 90 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade. Today, Norfolk, Virginia. It is presently 91 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what the temperature is in the shade. It's 91 degrees Fahrenheit. And the humidity there at the present moment is 59%, giving a feels like temperature of 103. So, it happens. Let's see. The Paul Jones came in and left this evening. She's a double... She is a double ender. Does anybody know what that means? What is a double ender? I'm looking it up, and if I find it, I will share it. Let's see. Okay. Let me bump over here. As you can see, I went to Wikipedia to find the information, because it was there. We're looking at the USS Paul Jones, 1862, a large 1,210-ton side wheel, double-ended steam gunboat of the Union Navy that served during the American Civil War. She carried heavy guns and was assigned to the Union blockade. Captured blockade runners. What? I'm curious about the model of ship. Side wheel, double-ended steam gunboat. Like, it's a paddle wheel boat, and the wheel is run by steam engine. What does it mean, double-ended? We're just... I don't know for certain, but looking at the picture, let me see if the other picture gives me any better idea. it doesn't really. I think what it means is that both ends come to a point, instead of one coming to a point and one being like flat, the way that most ships are. I think it being a double ender, I think it's coming to a point at both ends. Double ender, a vessel capable of moving both forwards and backwards, having bow and rudder at each end. Ah, that is not just is it like pointed at each side. It didn't occur to me, but yeah, that would be necessary. It has a rudder at each end, allowing for capacity. So being pointed, that's having a bow at each end, but it also has a rudder on each end. And for this ship, that makes sense since it's propelled from the center. So there's no reason not to do that, because it's got the paddle wheels on both sides. Okay. The Paul Jones came in and left this evening. She's a double ender and presents quite a fine appearance. She joins the James River Flotilla. Captain Wilkes has reported to take command of the forces on the James River. Some troops have arrived here today. They were few in number, and where they came from, I cannot say. They are no doubt on their way to join McClellan. Everything quiet on the James. We're no longer the flagship. The flag officer and suite, S-U-I-T-E. The flag officer and suite left us upon our arrival here and repaired on board of his own ship, the Minnesota. Interesting. This is a thing. So the flag officer being referred to here, of course, is once again referencing President Abraham Lincoln, who had been on the Dacotah, but the phrasing of his own ship, the Minnesota. Granted, I've mentioned multiple times I did not know a whole lot about naval operations during the American Civil War. I didn't know that Abraham Lincoln's his personal ship, his own ship, was the Minnesota. Just an interesting thing. Friday, July 11th. Thermometer 71 degrees. Raining slowly all the day. Wow. On the 10th, it was 90 degrees in the shade. On the 11th, it was 71 degrees. That's a significant drop. No, that's the kind of drop where if you're out marching or spending lots of time outdoors, you can get sick from drastic changes like that. Because it adds stress to your body, which it's you don't get sick from the weather changing. You get sick from the extra stress that gets put on your body by experiencing drastic changes in the weather. Anyway, raining slowly all the day. No news of importance. No news of importance from up the river. Some of Burnside's troop are still here waiting for transportation. Saturday, July 12th, several loads of Burnside's forces passed through en route for McClellan's army. They came through Norfolk and Dismal Swamp Canal. I'm sorry. Please tell me that is still a thing. Dismal Swamp Canal. It has its own website. From historic plantations to world-famous beaches of the Outer Banks, our region is full of places and events that celebrate our heritage and future. Whether visiting or considering relocation to our region, we know you will experience a taste of Southern hospitality that you won't soon forget. History of the Dismal Swamp. This is what I wanted. The Great Dismal Swamp is a geological wonder. For millions of years before the swamp was formed, it was under the sea. It is viewed by naturalists and other scientists as one of the best outdoor laboratories in the world. This natural treasure emerged as a landform when the continental shelf made its last significant shift. Just who discovered the Great Dismal and when is unknown. Colonel William Byrd II was a member of the commission that surveyed the North Carolina-Virginia state line through the swamp in 1728 and provided the first extensive description of it. Colonel Byrd first suggested draining the swamp and digging a north-south canal through it to connect the waters of Chesapeake Bay in Virginia and Albemarle Sound in North Carolina. In May 1763, George Washington made his first visit to the swamp and joined with several other prominent Virginians and North Carolinians to form two syndicates known as the Dismal Swamp Land Company and the Adventurers for Draining the Great Dismal Swamp. This group hoped to drain the swamp, harvest the trees, and use the land for farming. The company purchased 40,000 acres of swampland for $20,000 in 1763. Washington directed the surveying and digging of the 5-mile-long ditch from the western edge of the swamp to Lake Drummond, known today as Washington Ditch. In the late 1700s, Riddick Ditch was completed. Together, these ditches provided a way to transport logs out of the swamp and drain it. The adventurers soon realized, however, that the task of draining the swamp was enormous and gave up that part of their plan to concentrate on lumbering. They cut much of the cypress trees for use in shipbuilding and the cedars for shingles and other products. By 1796, Washington had become disappointed in the management of the Dismal Swamp lumber business and contracted to sell his 1/12 share to Light Horse Harry Lee, father of Robert E. Lee, who never was able to come up with the purchase price. So Washington's share passed on to his heirs upon his death in 1799. Camp Manufacturing Company, a predecessor of Union Camp, acquired all the Dismal Swamp Land Company's property in 1909. Lumbering continued in the swamp, and by the 50s, the last 20,000 acres of virgin timber were removed. In 1973, Union Camp donated its Virginia swamp holdings to the Nature Conservancy, which in turn deeded it to the Department of the Interior for creation of the Great Dismal Swamp National Wildlife Refuge. The refuge consists of 107,000 acres of forested wetlands surrounding Lake Drummond, a 3,100-acre natural lake located in the heart of the swamp. William Drummond, the first governor of North Carolina, discovered the oval lake, which still bears his name. Even though the average depth of the lake is only 6 feet, its unusually pure water is essential to the swamp's survival. The amber-colored water is preserved by tannic acids from the bark of the juniper, gum, and cypress trees, prohibiting growth of bacteria. Before the days of refrigeration, water from the swamp was a highly prized commodity on sailing ships. It was put in kegs and would stay fresh a long time. People spoke of the magical qualities of the swamp's tea-colored water and how, if it were regularly drunk, it prevented illness and promoted long life. Please do not take medical advice from this stream. Shadows, lovely time to join the stream for a dismal swamp. It could be worse. It could be the fire swamp with all its ROUSs. Okay. I grew up in Virginia. Granted, I grew up in Northern Virginia, the DC metropolitan area. I live in Virginia. I live in Southwest Virginia, which is Appalachia, not the Tidewater. So I have not spent a lot of time down in like the Norfolk, Richmond area. I did not know about the Great Dismal Swamp. Why? I just want to know where its name came from. That's what I want to know. Who named it? Why did they call it Dismal? That's what I want to know. Tell me of the Great Dismal Swamp. A large swamp in the coastal plain region of southeastern Virginia and northeastern North Carolina, between Norfolk and Elizabeth City, located in parts of the southern Virginia independent cities of Chesapeake and Suffolk, northern North Carolina cities or counties of Gates and Pasquotank, and Camden, some over 1 million acres. As of 2022, it's around 750 square miles, 480,000 acres. Please, I want to know the name. They don't know where the lake came from. I mean, presumably, if the swamp was all under ocean, the lake just formed because there was a depression there. Archaeological evidence suggests varying cultures. The Powhatan Empire extended to the northern edge around the time of the settling of Jamestown. Algonquin-speaking Native Americans lived there. William Drummond, the first governor of North Carolina, was the first European recorded as discovering its lake. That's the lake. Who named the swamp? Maybe that's a translation of what it was called by the indigenous people? Island communities existed until the Civil War. The Underground Railroad Education Pavilion. An exhibit set up to educate visitors about fugitive slaves who lived in the swamp, opened in 2012. No idea. I have no idea why it was named the Great Dismal Swamp. Oh, it said who was credited with naming it. Let me look. Okay. In 1665, Drummond, the first governor of North Carolina, was the first European recorded as discovering its lake, which was subsequently named for him. In 1728, William Byrd II, while leading a land survey to establish a boundary between Virginia and North Carolina colonies, made many observations of the swamp, none of them favorable. He is credited with naming it the Dismal Swamp. That citation comes from a history of Chesapeake, Virginia by the History Press, written by Raymond Harper. So, because it is great and also dismal. I mean, great because of size. I was like, why did they call it Dismal? Apparently it was William Byrd II. who gave it the moniker Dismal. It's a great name. The Great Dismal Swamp. It makes you really want to go there. Anyway, apparently we went there. Or our narrator did. Okay. Several loads of Burnside's forces passed through en route for McClellan's army. They came through Norfolk and Dismal Swamp Canal. As they passed our vessel, they showed every sign of jollity. They appeared in good health, robust, and in fine order for the arduous duties which they are about to perform. While they were passing, a number of nautical and man-of-war phrases were used, showing that sometime or other they had served on board of some of our men-of-war. They were familiar with the boatswain's pipe and calls. Is that pike? Boatswain's pipe. They were familiar with the boatswain's pipe and calls, and many of them, the calls, would they use to show their familiarity with the Marine service. The Great Segar was towed up here from Harrison's Landing, where we saw her the other day. The Great Segar? I'm looking it up because I find that interesting. The A.B. Segar was acquired by the Confederate States Navy in 1861 for service as a gunboat in Berwick Bay, Louisiana. The little gunboat was powered by 2 locomotive engines with cylinders bolted to the top of and axis parallel to her boiler, also from a railway locomotive. Sounds like they just put a train on the water. The A.B. Segar served as a dispatch boat commanded by acting master I.C. Coons. Huh. On 1 November 1862, Segar was run aground and abandoned near Berwick Bay. Seized and placed in service by the Union. But what did we just towed up here from Harrison's Landing? Huh. I guess it was towed. They saw it, but I had read it as towed by Union forces, but maybe it wasn't. I don't know if I can find a picture of it. I'm very curious. What did this ship actually look like? if it was a locomotive and 2 locomotive engines on the water. I don't think we're gonna find, yeah, because there wasn't an image in the Wikipedia article, so it's a long shot. But nothing in those first results seems like it's going to give me a picture. You don't always win. Train on the water. Exactly. Yes. It's 2 locomotive engines as a ship. Very interesting idea. Her smoke pipe was all askance, and in general presented a dilapidated condition. She left again in the afternoon, no doubt to be repaired. Sunday, July 13th. Went on shore this morning, heard a sermon, and came off again to the vessel. The church was pretty well filled, but nearly all ladies. A very small portion of the congregation were gentlemen. I saw nothing of the much talked of insulting representatives of the fair sex. On the contrary, a degree of politeness was exhibited. On the contrary, a degree of politeness was exhibited on the part of those in the immediate vicinity of the pew in which I sat. I am not of opinion that the news from Richmond has produced any change in the deportment of the people. Sorry. Deportment took me a second because it's not a word in common usage today. And it was... the pen bled a little bit during it. I am not of opinion that the news from Richmond has produced any change in the deportment of the people. Tuesday, July 22nd. Weighed anchor this morning early and left Norfolk. Came up the James River until we were approaching Jamestown Island, when we ran ashore through the awkwardness of the pilot. That's almost word for word what happened when the president was on board the ship. Because it was just off Jamestown Island that they ran ashore, or ran aground through the awkwardness of the pilot. Got off as soon as the tide ran up sufficiently to float us. Came to just above the island for the night. The Stepping Stone rendered some aid in getting us off, voluntarily offered. Okay, the Stepping Stone is a ship name. I'm gonna look it up. It's actually the USS Stepping Stones. That's a great ship name. I love this. USS Stepping Stones was a steamer purchased by the Union Navy during the early part of the American Civil War. Used by the Union Navy first as a dispatch boat and also as a gunboat assigned to patrol Confederate waterways. Built in New York City in 1861, it's a wooden ferry boat. Stepping Stones is a perfect name for a ferry boat. Amazing. Highlights highlights of the Stepping Stones' service were the operations on the James in July 1862 to help protect General George B. McClellan's beleaguered army at Harrison's Landing. That's what we were just reading about. And then later in 1863, she was stationed in the Nansemond River and participated in the Siege of Suffolk, undertaken by Longstreet's Corps. That's cool. I've never heard of that ship. I love that ship name. The USS Stepping Stones. Wednesday, July 23rd. We now lay within sight of City Point, and are now one of the ram fleet ready to run down the Merrimack No. 2, as her dimensions are much inferior to those of the prototype we apprehended period. There's a period there. So this is the first mention of the Merrimack No. 2. If you'll recall from earlier in the journal, the Dacotah was present for the confrontation between the CSS Virginia and the USS Monitor, two ironclads, one on the Union side and one on the Confederate side. The CSS Merrimack, the CSS Virginia, had been the USS Merrimack before the war started. So before the Confederate States seceded, it was the USS Merrimack. And Peltz, throughout the journal, calls it the Merrimack, even though the ship had been renamed and rebuilt. It had been rebuilt into an ironclad. It was a prototype ironclad, and it was renamed the CSS Virginia when that happened. So here we have him mentioning the Merrimack No. 2. So what happened to the CSS Virginia / USS Merrimack earlier in the journal was when the Confederate forces withdrew from the area, they burned it to the waterline themselves rather than let it be captured by Union forces. So the Union didn't succeed in sinking it, but they did trap it to where during the Confederate withdrawal, they would have had to leave it behind in order to escape. And rather than do that, the Confederate forces burned the ship. So now we have the Merrimack No. 2. And there's no history of that ship given here. And I was like, what's the Merrimack No. 2? And I looked it up before when I was putting together stuff in preparation for the stream. So I actually have some pages ready, because the ship he calls the Merrimack No. 2 is not the CSS Merrimack 2. The CSS Virginia 2. So, the USS Merrimack, it gets convoluted. USS Merrimack was the CSS Virginia. That's straightforward. So, somebody referring to the Merrimack 2, one would assume they're talking about the CSS Virginia 2, which does exist. However, that is not the ship that just showed up in the journal. So, hello, welcome in, Raiders. Hi, everybody. Welcome, 16-bit Eric. Hello, Whimsies. It is great to have you joining today. It is great to see you. I hope that the stream went well. 16-bit Eric. Hello again, Pretty Witchery. Hi, Blue Rooster. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. I am Anthony Wright Day Hernandez, Community Collections Archivist here at Virginia Tech, also known as Rogan 27. And here we are for Archival Adventures. This is the once-a-week show that I do from the archives here, where we look at materials from the archives. And presently, I've been doing a once-a-month series where we've been reading the Journal of Phillip Peltz, the chief engineer of the USS Dacotah. It is an 1862 journal when he was serving aboard the ship on the Union side during the American Civil War. And so the portion of the journal that we just arrived at is in July of 1862, so 162 years ago today, or actually, we did cover 162 years ago today. We're 162 years minus a couple of days now, because we're on the July 23rd now. And just started reading this entry. We now lay within sight of City Point. City Point is a spot on the river, on the James River, just outside Richmond, Virginia. And are now one of the ram fleet ready to run down the Merrimack No. 2, as her dimensions are much inferior. So I was just digging into, what is the Merrimack 2? I don't know, Blue Rooster. I haven't looked. It's not in the finding aid, is it? We know he was the chief engineer. He was buried in Pennsylvania. But that's all we get for the bio note. Let me check Find a Grave here. It just lists him as chief. Third assistant engineer, second assistant engineer, first assistant engineer, chief engineer. So I think his rank was chief. Hi, Paul Stryker. Yes, that is also possible, Paul Stryker. Merrimack 2, Electric Boogaloo. Let me see what I can find. I don't know how their online search works, but let's find out together. Muster rolls. I want to look up just a specific historical person, please. No, Civil War. That's what I want. Draft records, maps, Navy records, Navy personnel records. I also haven't done just like a general internet search for Peltz himself. Okay, so this just tells you how to go about doing searches. Let me just try. There's only one L in his name. And I can also check, I do have another possible source to sort of look. That's our own site. Civil War Navy, Diary of a Navy Officer. Oh, this is from the auction site where we bought the journal. Chief Engineer. They've got some excerpts. Well, let me try. Like in Star Trek, NCOs do exist. Possible that because he was an engineer, not a line officer, his position was his rank. Yeah, it's possible. But also, I don't know if this will provide, but Ancestry.com ends up being a good starting point for finding information about individuals. We use it a lot for doing the research that we then use in our biographical notes. I don't really know where he lived. So yeah, I just want like Virginia. Thanks. I don't have a birth year, so I know he's somewhere 20-ish probably in 1862. So I'm just gonna guesstimate and say just 1840 as a birth year. If it's a sloop, the CO would be a commander, which means the senior officers would likely all be lieutenants. I do think it is a sloop. Philadelphia makes sense. He was buried there. Church and town records. Find a grave. Oh, this is him. So we get some census information. Civil War muster rolls. Let's take a look at that. Veterans card files. U.S. Civil War soldiers. Pension index. Records and profiles. So one of these hopefully will give us his rank. He was 30. 36 when he died. Yeah, I actually could have gone and looked because I think our finding aid actually has the date of his birth. Yeah, but I didn't do that. I just guesstimated because I approached it the way that I would if I didn't know anything about him and was trying to find information, which I did not need to do. But apparently, let's see. Okay, so he was, let's see. Here in 1861, he was a private in the 91st Pennsylvania, Company E. But that's before he became chief engineer on the Dacotah. 91st Infantry, Pennsylvania. That, again, this is muster. Muster being when he joined. Companies E and K. Oh, come on, load the document, please. Companies E and K of the 91st Pennsylvania Infantry and Company H of the 24th Virginia. I don't know what the RC is. I assume that's Virginia, but I don't know. But again, yeah, it doesn't list a rank. This was an excellent question, and you get to see some of the tools. So muster information, he enlisted Veteran Reserve Corps. Thank you, Blue Rooster. That's what the VRC means. I did not know this. Okay. All right. I know I have. That's what I want. I know there's a searchable database. Soldiers and Sailors database. That's okay. How do I search you? People. No, I wanted to search. Stories, people, places, collections, preservation, and facts. There's a search box at the top. Is that just what I use? Oh, Soldiers and Sailors database. This is what I want. National Parks has a unit search thing. Yeah, this is what I was looking for. An important part of the Civil War took place on the high seas or the rivers. Civil War sailors' lives could be spent in the tedium of blockade duty off the Gulf or Atlantic coasts, in the din of battle inside an ironclad, or even in the Pacific raiding Yankee whalers. The Civil War soldiers and sailors system currently contains the records of approximately 18,000 African American sailors, though additional records will be added in the future. Okay, so Peltz Phillip G. Okay, the system has a little bit of quirkiness because it found Philip, as in people who mustered at King Philip. Let's will it accept quotation marks? No results. Else. No results. All right, so this is searching for sailors. But even though he was chief engineer on the Dacotah, all of the records on Ancestry indicated that he was a soldier, not a sailor. Let me search the soldiers database. We have John Peltz, Barnard, Phillip Peltz, Union, 5th Regiment Pennsylvania Cavalry, 65th Volunteers, Philip H. Peltz. Okay, so it looks like some of those ancestry records are actually for this Philip H. Peltz person, not Philip G. Peltz. Interesting. Is there a way to search both at the same time? Can I search by ship? I can. Ship name, Dakota. William Benning, Henry Lobson, John Francis, Joseph Enos, Thomas Adley, James Clark, Charles Thompson. It's funny, this is the 6th time we've delved into this journal, and this is the first time we've done this research to specifically like look up who was on the ship. Singleton, Johnson, Green, Hopewell, Hodges. He's not on the list. Yeah, I might go back to Ancestry and look again, because it seems like the records that we found were not him. We know who wrote the journal. That's not in question. And we have name and dates of birth and death. So let me do this search again, but slightly more specifically. All right, so we've got Phillip G. Peltz. I'm pretty sure of the Pennsylvania because that is where he is buried. If I'm remembering. Chief Philip G. Peltz was the Find a Grave, and that's the Philadelphia. Oh. View original. October 1832. Chief Engineer, USN. Interesting. I would not have necessarily come up with that as a G. Father was Samuel. Wait. No. Sons of... Maybe his brother was Samuel? Oh. Dr. Philip and Elizabeth. So his father was Philip and his mother was Elizabeth. I think he was the uncle of the Phillip Peltz that we were looking at a minute ago. 1832. Death certificate. Wait, that says... Yeah, okay, death date. 1868. Some of these are interesting. That's church membership records. It didn't seem to have anything. Let's see. The Pennsylvania Septennial Census. U.S. Register of Civil, Military, and Naval Service. Reverend Peltz? I don't think that's him. officers of the Continental and U.S. Navy and Marine Corps. This seems more... In commercial shipping, the chief engineer has the same rank and pay as the captain. Wonder if that's true in the U.S. Navy or if it was back then. Oh, I don't know. Let's look at this document and see what we can find. Peltz. Oh, but this doesn't really give ranks. It's just where they were assigned. Oh, ranking. Huh, okay, let me see. I just need to find where he is on the page now. All right, we've got Isaac Newton, Philip Inch, Lovering, Page, Houston. Yikes! Stop it. Sorry, I'm using a mouse. I don't usually use a mouse. I usually have a touch pen. Here we are. Philip G. Peltz, Pennsylvania, special duty. Baltimore. But that ranking with lieutenant commanders is the category that he's under. So I don't know what that means. In seniority, if not official rank. Navy list. Chaplains, professors of mathematics, and chief engineers. And he ranked with lieutenant commanders under chief engineers. The other document that we found that seemed relevant doesn't really give me any more because I can't see the original document. So it's just the transcription. And it just lists that he was third assistant, then second assistant, then first assistant, and then chief. So I don't think he had an official rank, but he was authority-wise equivalent to a lieutenant commander. That was an excellent question, Paul Stryker. And with more digging and going specifically to some more like official like Civil War naval registries, we might be able to find it. And we may have the necessary like volumes here or have access to them. I just don't know, since he wasn't in the database. It would take me just a little bit of time to like figure out exactly where we need to look. Since he didn't show up in this database anywhere. And I don't know why he didn't. I wonder. I know this is not how it was actually spelled for the ship. Yeah, no. $81 results when I add that. So 80 of those are Dacotah, and one of those is Peltz. Except none of them are Peltz. I do not understand. Oh, one of them is something. But when I limit it to just the Dacotah as the ship name. Huh. But yeah, there are no Peltzes. Unless it's misspelled in here, which is possible. but he doesn't seem to be in the National Park Service database. Anyway, I'm gonna go back to we were just getting to the mention of the Merrimack No. 2. But thank you for the question, Paul, because that was interesting. And if I can figure out any more, I will definitely share it when we return to the journal next month. So the Merrimack No. 2. This entry is from July of 1862. The Merrimack was the USS Merrimack, and then when the Confederacy seceded, they renamed it the CSS Virginia, but Peltz continues referring to it as the Merrimack. So referencing the Merrimack No. 2, first thought is, oh, let's look for the CSS Virginia 2, which existed. But when you dig into the history of the CSS Virginia 2, it did not exist yet. Insofar as there is no way that it was present on the James River in July of 1862. It was originally laid down sometime around April of 1862, but it didn't launch until June of 1863. So the Merrimack No. 2, being referred to here, is not the CSS Virginia 2. And that was very confusing when I first glanced at this to try and just orient to what we were going to look at today. Because I needed to know, okay, but what ship is this that he's referring to as the Merrimack 2? Now, if I look for Merrimack 2, the U.S. Navy has a ship that is the Merrimack 2. The second Merrimack, June of 1855. So this is actually not it. This is an older ship than the... Okay, wait. The Confederates in desperate need of ships raised Merrimack and rebuilt her as an ironclad ram. Yeah. But it was commissioned the CSS Virginia. So the Merrimack, the original Merrimack, was the Merrimack 2 SCFR that was rebuilt as an ironclad and named CSS Virginia. So that's not the Merrimack 2 being referenced in the letter, or in the journal. I love how they just reused names, and how the Union and the Confederacy referred to the same boats with different names. But I did figure out what ship we were actually referencing in the journal, and it is the CSS Richmond. It is the CSS Richmond that he is referring to as the Merrimack No. 2. So the CSS Richmond was the name ship of her class of 6 casemate ironclads built for the Confederate States Navy during the Civil War. Completed during 1862, it was assigned to the James River Squadron location, where it mostly supported Confederate forces near Richmond, which is, again, the specific location that we're at. burned in April 65 to prevent her capture by Union forces, which incidentally was what happened to the original CSS Virginia. So built to design by John Porter based on his earlier work on the original USS Merrimack, the CSS Virginia, retaining the traditional curving ship type hull, but with flat ends to the casemate, which is a fortified gun emplacement or armored structure from which guns are fired. Thank you. I did not know what actually a casemate was, but now I do. As usual for Confederate ships, dimensions vary. Anyway. The Richmond had a single-cylinder, 80 horsepower direct acting steam engine that had been stored at the Gosport Navy Yard when the brig Arctic was converted to a light ship in '59. Construction and career. Named for the capital of the Confederacy, was begun at Gosport Navy Yard in March 1862, launched May 6th, and towed up to Richmond on May 6th to escape federal forces threatening the yard and the lower James River. So, that information, which the citations are there, we could track them down if necessary, but the CSS Richmond was completed, was launched, and was in place on the James River outside Richmond when this journal entry was written. And then it goes on to say, see, she was sometimes referred to as Virginia II, Virginia number 2, or Young Virginia in the South, and as Merrimack number 2, New Merrimack, or Young Merrimack by Union writers. So Merrimack number 2 was how he referenced it. It gets confusing because once the CSS Virginia 2 launches, they all start calling that Virginia 2 and Merrimack 2. But before the CSS Virginia 2, the ship officially named that, launched later the same year, the Richmond was referred to as the Merrimack 2 or the Virginia 2. No bloody A, B, C, or D. So the confusion is not in the official names. The official names make sense. But what people actually called the ship is what makes it confusing. Because you have, from the Union author that we are looking at, from his stuff, we have the USS Merrimack, which is burned. And that was the only ironclad that the Confederates had. And then, a few months later, let's see, that the Virginia burned in March, I think. So roughly 4 months later, in July, a new Confederate ironclad that looks almost identical. So it makes total sense that they called it the Merrimack II. Even though its official name was the CSS Richmond. I mean, they hadn't bothered to call the original Merrimack the CSS Virginia, which was its official name at the time. But then a few months later, in the fall of 1862, the Confederacy actually launches a ship that they call the CSS Virginia II. That then is also called the Merrimack II by the Union. Because the original Virginia was the Merrimack. So the second Virginia is the second Merrimack. But in the interim, in the summer of 1862, it's the CSS Richmond that they call the USS Merrimack too. So confusing. Wait, is this where Miss Mary Mack from the clapping game comes from? No. Okay. No sure origin. First recorded in Pennsylvania. Interesting. I was not aware of the clapping rhyme. So anyway, it was just like it took me a little bit to track down. Like, I quickly determined that the CSS Richmond was the right ship, but then there was the confusion of, oh, wait, there was actually a ship called the Virginia 2, which was the Merrimack 2. So a little bit of info on the CSS Richmond. It was a Richmond-class ironclad ram, built in 1862 at the Norfolk Navy Yard, launched May 6th, 1862, completed in Richmond. So it launched in May, was towed up to Richmond, and was completed in Richmond in July, which is why the Dacotah first sees it in July of 1862. Commissioned CSS Richmond. Yeah. So there are some images of the CSS Richmond. I think this is actually the image that I ended up using for the cover of today's episode. Exactly. Yes. Thank you. It was May. Not I went with March because I remembered it being a while since it had happened, and I remembered it starting with M. So thank you for the clarification. Couldn't move further up the river before the Union troops arrived, so they burned it. And I think we covered that. I think we got to that part in either February or March, the episode that we did then, either the second or third of the episodes focused on this journal, is when we got to him witnessing that, because they burned it in the middle of the night. He was awakened at like 4 a.m, because the CSS Virginia was burning. So here's an engraving of the Richmond from 1862. The new rebel ironclad Richmond, or Virginia number 2. Stop it with the alternate names. From sketches found on board the something. Maybe this will say on board the teaser, the CSS teaser. Looks like that was published in Harper's Weekly. Might explain the confusion since they looked similar and it was only 2 months, which is why the James River picket. Yes. And then we get some. Oh, these are really good pictures. So we've got a front view engraving. We have the ground plan. Can you have a ground plan for a naval vessel? I mean, we would refer to this as a blueprint today, but looks like it had 4 cannons on either side plus 1 at the bow. Technically, it's a deck plan. Yes. And so this is the gun deck with a hold below, and then off on the sides of the hold are braces? I don't know. We'll look at the transcription because the quality isn't like super great when zoomed in. D are handrails up on top. So let's, I think it says braces. I think these are supports so that the gun deck doesn't collapse into the hold. But let's see. That information is not in the part that's typed here. That's exactly it? Okay. Reminds you of a submarine you visited when you saw the Alabama a while ago? Let's see. Photo number NH59187. The rebel ironclad fleet forcing the obstructions in James River, 23 January 1865. So this is technically 3 months before the CSS Richmond was scuttled. And this would appear to be the Richmond here, even though it's only got 2 gun ports open, and it has 4 on each side. 9 7-inch guns is a lot of weight. Yeah. I just think it's fascinating. I don't know this website. It's very basic, but it has some great info on this ship. This is NavSource Online. I don't. Copyright 1996 to 2024 NavSource Naval History. They've been doing this. They've been maintaining this site since 1996. 15 to 22,000 pounds per gun. Okay, that is pretty heavy. So then there's this is from the U.S. Naval Institute, and this is the last one we're going to look at before I go back to the journal itself. But this is an entry on the Confederate Ironclad Navy. I'm just skipping a lot of it and going straight to the part that's relevant to the ship that we're considering at the moment. Incidentally, I can give you this is the NavSource link, the one. Come on. That's the NavSource archives link, the one that points to this page that had those images on it. And then this page is from the Naval Institute. What is your book on Civil War ironclads? The ironclads are fascinating, especially because like the CSS Virginia, like the famous Virginia versus Monitor battle, the CSS Virginia, the Confederacy's first ironclad, was a much older ship that they rebuilt to be their first ironclad. Like that, I don't know, it's fascinating to me. Virginia and North Carolina ironclads. Of the approximately 50 ironclads laid down in the Confederacy, 20 of them incorporated Porter's harbor defense designs. The 150-foot Richmond was the first of these placed under construction at the Navy Yard in Norfolk. So if I follow this article correctly, like if I'm understanding the timeline, it was not, the Richmond was not like the second ironclad completed, because there were others. It's just that the others that were done were down in Louisiana and like on the Mississippi River, etc. So this was following up on the CSS Virginia. This was the second one, like the very first brand new one that was located in the James River, Richmond, Virginia area. So it was the first of these placed under construction at the Naval Yard in Norfolk. Advancing Union forces led to the vessel being hastily launched and towed up the James River to Richmond, where she was completed. The Richmond became the nucleus of the James River Squadron, which cooperated with the batteries at Drury's Bluff to defend the river approach to the Confederate capital. In 1864, 2 additional ironclads, the Virginia II and Fredericksburg. So yeah, I had the timing wrong on this too. The actual CSS Virginia II didn't launch until 1864. So 2 years they were referring to the Richmond as the Virginia II, even though it was officially the Richmond. And then they christen a ship the Virginia II. That's not confusing at all. U.S. ironclads of the time were very much rivercraft. Their seaworthiness was dubious. And that makes total sense because they sat really low in the water. Yeah, Paul, if you want to share, you can tell me here, there, on the Discord, whatever. And the monitor sank because it sat so low. Yeah. Oh, it's called Duel of the Ironclads. That's a great title. I'm gonna look it up and ooh, thank you for that. I just want to search. Come on. Angus Constant. Really? Really? Is it in English? It goes a lot into the details of how and why they were constructed, including the Royal Navy's "oh crap" reaction when French built the Glory. Oh, I found it. I don't know why it didn't come up. That's weird. I could have found it a lot easier, but I was trying to find the entry in WorldCat so that wherever you are physically located, you might find a copy in a library near you. So that should take you to the WorldCat catalog, which should point you towards a library or let you know the closest libraries to you that have a copy of it if you're interested. So yeah, 1862, the Virginia II and the Fredericksburg were launched and joined the James River Squadron. The James River Squadron, with its ironclads and wooden gunboats, contributed significantly to the capital's defense and was one of the Confederate Navy's most powerful squadrons. I'm not so interested in like the 1864 stuff because that's beyond where this journal will take us. So feel free to explore that on your own. The link is there in the chat. Anyway, it was the CSS Richmond that our author, Chief Peltz, referred to as the Merrimack No. 2. All right. now part of the Ram fleet, ready to run down the Merrimack No. 2, as her dimensions are much inferior to those of the prototype we apprehended. No difficulty in meeting her. The Galena and Monitor are our colleagues in expectation of the enemy. While there are many gunboats a few miles down the river protecting the army from an attack by land. Okay. So let me parse this. The punctuation is weird. No difficulty in meeting her. The Galena and Monitor are our colleagues in expectation of the enemy. While there are many gunboats a few miles down the river protecting the army from an attack by land. All right. Technically, we are at time for the stream to end. I will go through at least Saturday the 26th, since we spent so much time doing research instead of reading the entries. But it was well-used time. It was really interesting learning about the boats themselves, as well as digging into what rank Peltz was. I really appreciate the question, because I had not thought to specifically look that up before. And I found it really interesting to do that investigation. So Saturday, July 26th, last night, one schooner was burned near Harrison's Landing. Landed with damaged something. Ah! Yeah, okay, I see that. It helps that somebody else's eyes have looked at this and that they did some transcription before. Last night, one schooner was burned near Harrison's Landing, loaded with damaged corn. This was supposed to have been the work of some incidentals? Some incendiary. Yeah, no, it does say incendiary. This was supposed to have been the work of some incendiary of disloyal proclivities. Her captain disappeared, so a traitor. Her captain disappeared at the same time. Whether he has gone over to the other side or whether he was burned on board, no one seems to know. All as yet seems somewhat of an enigma. Oh, it doesn't tell us the name of the schooner. We brought... Yeah. We brought two, a small sailboat. It makes sense. It's just that two in this case would normally be spelled with one O, if I'm understanding right. Anyway, we brought two, a small sailboat standing in for the rebel shore, and brought the men consisting of 4 on board. They penned their innocent of desertion? They poured their innocence of desertion. Blah, blah, blah. They poured their innocence of desertion. So they were sent back. They proved. I bet it's proved. Yeah, it's proved. They transcribed it as poured, but it is definitely proved. They proved their innocence of desertion, so they were sent back to their regiment. Several flags of truce passed us today, but no prisoners came down. The rebels were quite discernible at City Point from our vessel. Quite a line train of cars arrived. Cars? And present running in every direction. Quite a long train of cars arrived and present running in every direction. I don't understand. Point seems very lively. I think cars arrived and then dispersed. I'm very confused though. If anybody else understands this more than me, let me know. Quite a line train of cars arrived and also, I'm not sure this is present. That's how they transcribed it, but this looks more to me like P-E-R-S than P-R-E-S. It is. I get it. Okay. Quite a line train of cars arrived. And actually, I don't think it's line either. I think it's long. He dotted it, but it's long. It's quite a long train of cars arrived, and persons running in every direction. The point seems very lively. What it means we have yet to learn. We were slightly alarmed this afternoon from the report that 3 rebel steamers were coming down the river. Soon we were in readiness for them. Long we waited for their appearance. We gave it up finally in disgusted disappointment. We had hoped for a run at the second Merrimack, Richmond. And if I had flipped another page, I would have known it was the Richmond. We have noticed several pickets directly opposite to our anchorage, thus demonstrating the vigilance of the rebels in their diabolical war of rebellion. Or diabolical war or rebellion. I love that. I love that. We're going to end there. I just love that we're ending with one of his very colorful turns of phrase. We have noticed several pickets directly opposed to our anchorage, thus demonstrating the vigilance of the rebels in their diabolical war or rebellion. The colorfulness of just referring to it as diabolical. All right, so we'll pick up next month with July 30th, whereby nothing of much importance apparently occurred since he wrote on the 26th. So it skips ahead a few days. But we will be right on track, actually, because the next time we visit the journal will be on August 7th, and we will be beginning with the entry from July 30th and proceeding on into August. So we'll just continue moving forward 162 years in the past. I'm enjoying it. I don't know. I think it's fascinating. Every time I learn more, I've learned just glancing at stuff. I'm aware of so many more kinds of naval vessels from the 1860s. The ironclads are fascinating. I did not realize that, like, they're called ironclads. And it had not occurred to me that they literally were wooden ships that had iron clad onto them. And that made them sink down so they sat really low in the water. And I thought they were purpose-built iron ships. I didn't realize that that's not what they were at first. Also, as I mentioned, in a couple of weeks, we'll be focusing specifically on the air forces of the Union and the Confederacy, and exploring the use of hot air balloons during the mid-18th century. War balloons were a thing. And then I think, I haven't confirmed, but I do believe that at some point in the future, if we have the material, we will do an episode focusing on early submarines as well. But I haven't dug into that one to see specifically what we have. So, unless, have I? Do I know that's coming? I don't remember. Is it this? The CSS Hunley? Is that the one? Oh, yes. Sterling's ahead of me. So yeah, we have coming next week. We're moving ahead to World Wars I and II, and some food and agriculture programs. 2 weeks from now, Civil War hot air balloons. And then at the end of the month, we will have our speculative fiction episode, Conan, Man of Destiny. We'll start out August with a return to this journal. And then the second week of August, August 14th, we will be examining the CSS Hunley, the first submarine in, the first successful submarine, period, as far as I'm aware. So that's what's coming up. We've done a lot more Civil War recently than we ever did in the past. And it's mostly because we've been finding fascinating things in this journal that have made me say, oh, we need to look at that. Because I was never super excited about the American Civil War. But reading through this journal and like the technological advances with the ironclads and the hot air balloons and the submarine, and like, it's really fascinating, and I'm quite enjoying it from the perspective of looking at archival materials sparks wonder, and I love it. So thank you for joining me on the journey. I hope that you will return for some of those as they come up. And then towards the end of August, Kira will join me again, and we will move ahead with our discussion of gelatin. We won't be quite so far back in history with the origins of gelatin, and we might actually get to a brand name that we know today. We'll talk about Jell-O. Anyway, let me see where we're gonna go. for the raid today. Let me bring this up because I don't. Let's see. Oh, there's some mystery happening over on Stephen Joy's channel. There's... Ooh. That's a possibility. So I never get to. It looks like... Ooh. We have options today. There is no paleontologizing around, so we will not be heading off to Dinosaur Dig because that is not presently occurring, but I'm going to give you a choice. We can do math. We can look at shorebirds on rocks. We can... It looks like there's gaming happening over on Punkelnix's channel, who I never get to raid, or puzzles with Stephen Joyce. Any preferences? Math? Aquarium? Punkelnix or Stephen Joyce? Puddleglum is gonna say, yes, Hannah. I figured that's where you were going, Puddleglum, but I kind of feel like I need to pop over to Punkelnix because Punkelnix is never on. I never get to raid them. So as much as I love and support Stephen Joyce, I think we're going to pop over to Punkelnix today. Because, yeah. They've got the category as makers and crafting, but it looks like they are presently playing a game, which is fine. Punkelnix is an awesome human, does wonderful craft stuff, and just... I would love to introduce you to the wonderful, wonderful individual that Punkelnix is. So I'm going to guide you all over to their stream. Please join me and say hello when we get over there. Thank you very much for joining me today for Archival Adventures. As I noted, there will be more Archival Adventures coming up next week. If you care to watch me do video games or anything on my personal channel, those streams happen at other times, and the next one of those is coming up on Saturday. But I hope I will see all of you again soon. Until I do, keep exploring history, everybody.